Hello and welcome to another edition of Resistance TV. This evening we're going to be speaking about the activities of Palestine Action. We've spoken about Palestine Action on a number of occasions on Resistance TV, but I'm absolutely delighted this evening that we've got Ronnie Barkan, who will be our guest tonight. Ronnie, many people will be well aware of Ronnie's reputation, his acumen as a dedicated activist. He's an Israeli dissident, activist with Palestine Action. Also the co-founder of Boycott from Within, somebody who is a very strong anti-Zionist activist and a real inspiration. So it's fantastic to have Ronnie with us this evening. And Ronnie, just get you on the screen and just talk a little bit, perhaps, if we can, to begin with, because you were arrested. And I know we can't go into too much detail about the court case that you will be facing next week. But you were arrested because you were involved in the action against Elbit Systems, their Bristol headquarters. And I'm sure our viewers will be well aware of Elbit. For those that aren't, it's an Israeli arms company that's got several bases here in the UK. And there's been a concerted effort by Palestine Action to really try and close Elbit Systems down, to really drive them out of the country. It's an absolutely immoral, well, I mean, there's a whole issue about the arms trade per se, but particularly in relation to this Israeli company and its involvement in the suppression of the Palestinian people. And it's really interesting speaking to other activists in Palestine Action, Ronnie, when they have told me that when they've spoken to local people living nearby the Elbit factories, that when they realize what it is, that they're very hostile to Elbit and actually very supportive of the activities and the efforts of Palestine Action. Is that something that you've found in your work with Palestine Action as well?
Yes. Hi, and thank you for having me. I have whoever I've been speaking to since the action of a year from last year. I have received a lot of support from different people when we organized some informational event here in Brighton, where I'm staying. I'm currently under house arrest in Brighton. I've been just sharing posters for the event, and everyone was on board. Everyone was excited about it. And you mentioned that in other facilities, Elbit facilities, where, for example, Shenstone and Oldham near Manchester, where such actions took place, the community was on board. I mean, initially they didn't know what this unassuming building was all about, but once they realized, once they have been basically educated and learned about the practices of Elbit Systems and how horrible and barbaric that company actually is, they have organized themselves to show support outside of that factory. And there was a big celebration when Elbit had to shut down its factories in Oldham. It has, over the past couple of years, due to ongoing direct actions by Palestine Action and many activists who were involved, of the 10 sites that existed that were producing these murder machines by Elbit, 2 of them have been permanently shut down, the one in Oldham and the former headquarters in London. I took part in an action along with others on last Nakba Day, May 15th, against the Elbit headquarters in Bristol. And when we mentioned the Nakba, I would like to tell the audience, to remind the audience, that the Nakba is not only a historical event, it is an ongoing process. The Nakba is ongoing. It is now 75 years to the Nakba, ethnic cleansing, and all the other horrible crimes that Israel is responsible for, and which Elbit, being the largest arms manufacturer in Israel, is not only a part of this crime, taking part of this crime by proxy. They are actively on the ground with the Israeli forces, in some cases, perpetrating these crimes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you're saying you were arrested following the action in Bristol against Elbit. But unlike the other activists, you were actually remanded in custody, weren't you, for around a month or longer. And as you're saying now, you're kind of under house arrest. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about that. And also, I believe that you were injured as well, weren't you, by the security staff at Elbit Systems. So maybe you could say a little bit about being held for all that time, and also how you were treated by the security staff when you were on site.
Yeah, so again, without going into too much detail, because all of this will obviously be discussed in court later on in the coming weeks. There were 9 who got arrested for the action of last year. 2 of the 9, including myself, are Israeli dissidents. And while basically everyone was held on remand for a few days, for almost a week, and later on released, the 2 of us who are not British citizens, actually Israeli citizens, we were held on remand for a month. So that is Stavit Sinai and myself. And obviously the experience in prison is not a fun experience to anyone, but it is also a very educational one to see the system of oppression from up close. I can also compare a little bit between, the few incidents where I was kept overnight in detention for participating in nonviolent demonstrations in the West Bank, and then seeing the judge the next day and released, usually after a day. And I can tell you a bit about, the differences between the Israeli prison system and here. But all in all, obviously, I think that the most difficult part of being in prison is the lack of agency, and having someone else who definitely doesn't have my best intent, who doesn't have the best intentions or in heart, ruling my life and deciding on every aspect of my life. So as you mentioned, I was actually injured during that action of last year. I suffered a fractured rib I was assaulted by the security guard, Elbit security guard. And that is how I arrived in prison, basically, with a fractured rib. So that was on top of everything else, on top of the prison experience, that was something to deal with. And I needed, obviously, to get the proper medical attention and so on. And that was very difficult to do within the prison.
How did the prison staff treat you, Ronnie? And what about the other prisoners? I mean, were they aware of your moral stance that you were taking, and were they sympathetic to it, or not?
Some of them were. I mean, I was happy to talk about it. And there was this bond that was created between myself and other prisoners. I mean, when we talked about Palestine and about why I was there, obviously most prisoners, they're not that aware of the situation. So I had to educate a few and to just discuss these issues. About the prison staff, I would say that most of them were relatively acting in a professional way, but that doesn't mean that they are treating the people under their care with respect or giving them their basic needs. I mean, it is all in the hands of the prison guards, and this is a very oppressive system in itself. It is quite it was quite sarcastic that in the educational building, they had a quote by Nelson Mandela saying that education is the weapon of the oppressed. And that was kind of, that slogan was there in the educational facility within the prison.
Yeah, and it sounds like you were doing a bit of that yourself then, in terms of raising people's awareness about the reality of the situation on the ground in Palestine, because, as you say, the way in which the media cover the situation there, we get a very jaundiced picture. We don't really get, to the truth. I mean, the way in which, for example, the appalling incursions into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, for example, I mean, it's referred to as a contested religious site on the BBC, and it's just totally appalling, biased reportage. So it's hardly surprising, I think, that many people don't fully appreciate or understand the reality. Although I think consciousness is being raised. I think more people are now aware of the situation. That's my experience anyway, Ronnie. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I think certainly through the activities of Palestine Action, and there's obviously the big rally on the weekend, to celebrate Quds Day. Do you think that's cutting through now? Is that your experience that it's cutting through? I mean, you mentioned when you were talking about local people living near the various Elbit system sites that that they were sympathetic, as I was also saying in my introduction. So it does seem that we're sort of pushing at an open door when people hear the reality of the situation there. That people, I think, tend to come on board. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, there is the necessity to take action because of the horrible crimes that are perpetrated by Elbit, and I will be happy to elaborate on that. Other than that, it is also a great way to mobilize and to educate. I don't want to say it in a patronizing way, but just to inform people about these crimes that have to be basically faced head on. And because basically the UK government is not doing it's not basically following its obligation under the law, not UK law, not international law, because they, under the law, will have to boot Elbit out of here. But since they are actually becoming complicit in this crime, it is basically up to us, the people, to speak up and to make sure that the law is being basically followed. Now, I think that the taking action, and especially the way that Palestine Action is doing this is a really good way of also focusing people on the things that matter. And when you mention Al-Quds, for example, you know that the acting Israeli ambassador, Tzipi Chotoveli, is her dream, according to her dream is to have the Israeli flag waving on top of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, meaning like the destruction of the mosque and taking over that place and building the third temple on top of it. And we are hearing, because the discourse is becoming more and more explicitly racist, explicitly fascist, explicitly Zionist, we are hearing more and more of this crazy talk, for example, where you have people who are attempting to slaughter a lamb on the grounds of Al-Aqsa Mosque because of something that they interpret from some book, which is a very false interpretation, by the way. They are trying to create facts on the ground and follow their dream of establishing the third temple on top of the mosque. And this goes as far as the ambassador, or goes as far as high-ranking diplomats and ministers in the Israeli government. So, but the important thing to know is that this new government with Netanyahu and Ben Gvir is finally taking off this facade of normality and liberalism that Haaretz newspaper has been working so hard to maintain for the past 75 years. So the greatest form of propaganda is not that which is all based on lies, is not what people imagine when they think of propaganda, which is all blatant lies. The greatest form of propaganda is that which takes the facts but sugarcoats it, or gives you a whole other interpretation, a whole other narrative that is totally goes against the real issues at hand and kind of tries to focus on something totally different. And that is what Haaretz newspaper is all about. And that is how they manage to create this facade of normality and liberalism and democracy, or flawed democracy, or something like that. There is not an iota of democracy in Israel. This was founded on everything that's opposed to democratic values, everything that's opposed to equality, the rights of minorities, multiculturalism, and so on. It was founded from the grounds up as a race state. It is a Zionist race state. This is the definition of that place. It is carrying on, it is perpetrating apartheid for the past 7 decades, along with all sorts of other crimes, including colonialism, including military occupation, which didn't start in 1967, it started in 48, and on and on. So this is what we are dealing with. And when we understand it in that context, it's not about tweaking the situation. There is no conflict in Israel-Palestine, which is the exact same spot of land. There is no conflict there. There is a system of oppression, a brutal, barbaric system of oppression, which Elbit is a key player, a key element in. And that system of oppression has to be abolished. There's simply no other way of going about it. And now with this new government, and with this new type of discourse, finally, we have a chance to point at the issues that matter, at the actual things that matter, and what is needed in order to abolish that system of oppression and bring about a future that will respect the rights of all the people of that land.
What do you make to the political class in this country then, Ronnie? We saw the Prime Minister entertaining Benjamin Netanyahu recently. I mean, are they exacerbating the situation in your opinion, or just what's your thoughts on both sides of the political spectrum in the House of Commons?
Yeah, look, I think that again, the government here is showing its true face by welcoming, pulling the red carpet for Netanyahu, lending legitimacy to what Netanyahu and his government stands for. And what is interesting is to see these rabid Zionist organizations speaking more and more of an apologetic discourse. Even the Board of Deputies and all the others are, Labor Friends of Israel, all of those, they are speaking more and more of an apologetic discourse, because they understand that what Netanyahu and his new government are showing the world doesn't sit well with most of the audience. So they're trying to do what Haaretz, that I mentioned a moment ago, has been doing all along. And finally, I'm happy to say that, hopefully it is failing in its mission to show this better face, nicer face of Israel. You see the most rabid Zionist organizations trying to speak that discourse, because otherwise they know that this is a lost battle as far as they're concerned.
What's your thoughts about the... Oh, go on, sorry, keep going.
I'm just saying it's not necessarily what the UK government is doing, because it is just carrying on its tradition of supporting the settler colonialist project in Palestine. But actually, it is about the people of this country basically realizing what this is about, and hopefully standing up against the crimes that the government is complicit in.
In terms of the complicity of the British government, we go back to the Balfour Declaration, can't you? And it's been this almost a tacit approval. Essentially, they've been hand in glove, really, it seems to me, with the Zionist entity. But I'm just kind of wonder what your thoughts were about the role of the Israel lobby in bringing down Jeremy Corbyn, the Corbyn project. And in Jeremy Corbyn, we have the potential, I think, of a prime minister being elected who, genuinely was sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And certainly my opinion anyway, the thing that really destroyed the Corbyn project more than anything else was the capitulation to the Zionist lobby. I know there were other factors, and obviously the referendum, the decision to hold the second referendum on the European Union was the final sort of coup de grace. But what's your thoughts about the role of the Israel lobby? Because we even heard Benjamin Netanyahu, talking very critically about Jeremy Corbyn. Am I right when I say that the Israel lobby had a very significant role to play in actually destroying the Corbyn project in this country?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And we know from the Al Jazeera reports, Al Jazeera investigation about the labor files. There was recently also an interview with Ford about the issue and how the labor was actively, even the labor in themselves were undermining Corbyn. But I think that what we see is that, first of all, I am very much opposed to any and all conflation between criminal supremacist Zionism and Judaism. There is no connection between the two. I talk about it quite a bit. They are based on the exact opposite values. And I'm not here to defend Judaism. I don't care about this or that religion, but I do care about the false conflation between the two. And any and all conflation between Zionism and Judaism is in itself anti-Semitic, because it is in itself treating all Jews as one monolithic group. Whenever an Israeli representative says, and you hear them saying it all the time, they say something like, if you're critical of that Zionist state, the state of Israel, you must also be anti-Semitic. And that the logic of that statement necessarily says that if you are Jewish by religion or otherwise, you are necessarily, because of that quote-unquote Jewishness, supportive of that criminal apartheid regime. This is what it says. So basically, it's just like saying all Muslims are terrorists. They're saying all Jews are apartheid supporters and supremacists and so on. No, there is a very clear distinction between Zionism, which is a form of white or racial supremacy, and Judaism, which is a religion. Now, the problem was with Corbyn himself, which I have a lot of sympathy to Corbyn, the person, and most of his politics. The problem was that he took the apologetic tone, the apologetic standpoint, and he tried to convince the world that he was not what he was accused of, where actually, obviously, all these accusations were totally false, rather than clearly standing up against the slander campaign against him. The moment that he took the apologetic tone, he lost. So unfortunately, I see Corbyn as digging his own political grave, unfortunately, and obviously the whole institution was helping him to do that. First by expelling his supporters, and obviously trumping up the all these, like, the slander and accusations against him. Now, I would object the sort of this comparison between Corbyn and, say, Bernie Sanders, who represent very, very different things. Bernie Sanders, as far as internal politics in the US are concerned, maybe he represents something different. But as far as foreign policy, he is just as criminal and supremacist as any other US president or challenger to the presidency. So, he even refused to call Israeli war crimes. I mean, in his interview with Mehdi Hassan, he refused to call it a war crime about what Israel was doing in Gaza. In his interview with Dina Takruri, he was, when he was questioned about Israel, the possibility of having one state with, the same one person, one vote in Palestine, he totally rejected that. And he said, I do not want to see the ending the abolishment of the state of Israel. Because, yes, having one person, one vote would mean the abolishment of the race state and establishing a democratic, legitimate state on top of it. Of course, that is exactly what that means. But people like Sanders refuse that. People like Corbyn, as far as I understand, support the rights of all the people of that land. So it is a very tragic situation that he did not manage to become the leader of the UK. Then again, if he would have become the leader here, I don't think that he would have been alive for too long, because the Zionist state would not have allowed that to happen. Because it's not like Ireland, it's not like South Africa. If you have a NATO country with veto rights led by a person like Corbyn, that would mean the possibility of the abolishment of the Zionist race state. It only takes one such country for the dominoes to start falling.
Oh, indeed. I was going to say, Ronnie, then, I mean, just moving on from that a little bit, I mean, do you think the Zionist lobby is guilty of overreach? I saw, just for example, in this country now, some criticisms being even levelled against Sir Keir Starmer, who kind of, in many ways led the charge against Jeremy Corbyn. But I mean, even he's sort of now being sort of in the crosshairs, as it were. I mean, and I also saw the other day, I can't remember where I read it now, actually, but somebody was saying that for the first time, this is amongst Democrats in the United States, that people that identify as Democrat, actually a majority now apparently are more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than they are to the Zionist entity in that sense. So things seem to be moving. I mean, is that because people are just becoming more aware, or is it, as I suggest, that maybe the Zionist lobby is guilty of overreach, pushing too far? I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
It's interesting to see, for example, the sentiment among American Jewry versus the sentiment of those Israelis who immigrate to the US and they have very different political views obviously about Israel, and they hold very different values. So you see different communities who are supposedly should be sharing the same values. They have very different values, and yes, I think that those people abroad, even those who grew up in Zionist households, like many of those, the Jewish population in the US, they are basically, pushed into the corner, and kind of they need to reevaluate where they stand and whether their blind support of the Zionist state actually sits with their values. And you see many people like that, who some of them have been, I don't know, people like Peter Beinart, for example, who has been cheerleading for the Zionist race state. He has been the worst of the worst, one of the greatest opponents of Palestinian rights. For the past decades, he is kind of slowly transitioning. He's still not an ally, far from being an ally, but he's slowly transitioning into this position where he will eventually have to reject Zionism altogether. He's still clinging on to his Zionism, but because those who consider themselves as, peace-loving and humanists and so on, they're in a bind. They don't know what to do with this state, especially when it exposes itself for what it really is, like with this new government. So I think that is something that each person, each individual has to undergo this kind of transition. And the fact that the Zionist lobby has such an overreach, as you put it, is actually just exacerbating that process. So I don't mind the Zionists showing their true face. I don't mind them meddling with American politics and UK politics and so on. I think that only shows their true character.
Although I know
basically, we should just face them and challenge them for what they really are. And it's not this or that policy. People think that if we only change the policies of the state, and I alluded to that before, if you only change the policies of that state, no, it's not the policies of that Zionist state. It is the very character of that state that is criminal and wholly illegitimate, and that has to be challenged.
No, indeed. I was going to talk a bit about, because I know some people have said that the way in which the Zionist lobby conducts itself actually exacerbates and generates anti-Semitism, rather than actually
yes, Zionism is the greatest anti-Semitic force in the world. I said that any and all conflation between criminal supremacist Zionism and Judaism is in itself anti-Semitic. You see, you and I are anti-Zionist because we are humanists. But I have many Jewish friends, ultra-Orthodox friends, who are anti-Zionist in every bone because they are Jewish, because of their Judaism. Zionism is the greatest threat to their Judaism.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I mean, I've seen rallies in the United States with thousands of Orthodox Jewish demonstrators, opposing Zionism, opposing the state of Israel. But just let me move on. Of course, we're running short of time now, Ronnie. I just want to talk a little bit about the situation on the ground, in Israel, actually. And obviously, as I've said in the introduction, you're a co-founder of Boycott From Within. And I was listening to an interview with Norman Finkelstein recently, and I just want to get your take really on what your sense is as to the opposition to the Israeli state and the support perhaps for a state of with equal rights for the Palestinians and Jewish Israelis across the piece, which would be the end of the kind of Jewish supremacist state. I mean, the population of Israel seem to keep electing, very extreme right-wing governments. Although, in Norman Finkelstein's opinion, is that there isn't much at all. It's either it's extreme right to far, far out there, on the outer extremities of right-wing. There isn't any kind of left-wing alternative. But he was quite sceptical in this interview I saw him speaking about support on the ground from regular Israelis. He said that they'll come out in their tens of thousands in opposition to this kind of fascist government which has recently been elected. He said, but where are the Palestinian people? He says, I don't mean just a handful of people here and there that have been that, but he says they don't come out in their tens of thousands for the Palestinian people. So what's your thought? I mean, are you optimistic about moving opinion? Is it going in the wrong direction in your opinion in Israel itself, or what?
So I am optimistic, but not thanks to the Israeli public or Israeli society. So first of all, I have much respect to people like Finkelstein and Chomsky, but I challenge their politics quite a bit. Both, who are very knowledgeable about the situation, choose to only focus on the occupation of 67, what I call the minor occupation. This is not the main issue. The main issue is not that horrible and barbaric occupation of 67, and there are no words to describe how barbaric the situation is in Gaza, which amounts to possibly the crime of genocide. And at the same time, the Zionist race state is not about that minor occupation, but actually the way it was founded is all about ethnic cleansing, denying people from actually living on their land and denying equality for those who remained on that piece of land. Because not everyone was expelled. Those who were expelled are denied from ever coming back, and those who remained are denied equal standing. And this is how the whole framework was founded. The whole legal system, the whole every apparatus of the state was founded based on that and to maintain that system. So we have a situation where 1/3 of the population, about 7 million people, are among the privileged group that I belong to, and they control the lives of another 2/3 of the population, half of which are in forced exile for the past 7 decades. This is the situation, and this is why Israel is an apartheid state from the get-go. Because people are denied the right to even live on their land because they were born into the wrong ethnic racial category. Now, I would challenge the terminology of Jewish supremacy. There is no Jewish supremacy. There is white supremacy or racial supremacy, if you will. Whiteness, by the way, is a construct. If anyone is confused about the term white supremacy, whiteness is a construct, and I can explain why the Zionist state is a white supremacist state. Now, it is not a Jewish supremacist state because when people claim, like organizations, like Zionist organizations like B'Tselem, who peddle this discourse of lies about Jewish supremacy, they, by acknowledging as if Israel promotes quote-unquote Jewish supremacy, they lend legitimacy to the greatest lie within Zionism, as if there is some connection between the Zionist state and something that can be construed as Jewish, where the only thing that the Zionist state does is to use and abuse Judaism to justify its racial supremacy. So my nationality, according to the state, is Jewish. My fellow citizens in that state, their nationality is different. We are both Israeli citizens, but we have different nationalities. Because the legal system is based on making these distinctions between those of quote-unquote Jewish nationality and all the others, the Übermenschens versus the Untermenschens. Now, other than all of that, going back to Finkelstein and his attitude, I think that obviously there is no left in Israel, never ever existed. There was never a left-wing camp in Israel. You have different forms of Zionism, 2 forms exactly, the honest Zionists and the liberal Zionists, which is Haaretz newspaper, 972 magazine, and so on. But the honest Zionists, this is what you see now with the emerging government. They are racist and they are proud of it. They say this is ours and only ours. This is an exclusive state and we are proud of that. These are the honest Zionists. My argument with them is not about facts. My argument with them is about morals, about moral issues. With the so-called liberal Zionists, they are not only lying to the world every moment of every day, they lie to themselves because they need to feel that they are moral and Zionist at the same time. So I would argue that the choice is, and these two communities, they don't get along. They will never get along because their whole identity is so very different. And is their identity, those liberals, they cannot accept the settlers in the West Bank, and the settlers in the West Bank will never accept that false discourse of so-called liberal Zionism. So you have this rift, this schism. And I think that what is happening is that the far right is becoming more and more mainstream. The building of the Third Temple and all of that is becoming more and more mainstream. That honest Zionist discourse is becoming more and more mainstream. And in the short term, it is dangerous because this will come on the backs of Palestinians. And we have to do as much as we can to protect the Palestinians under the Zionist boot. But in the long term, I think that this is our greatest opportunity to overcome Zionism and abolish that Zionist state and build something that respects the rights of all the people of that land.
I mean, perhaps in conclusion, then, Ronnie, just how are you treated in Israel when when you're there? I mean, obviously you're involved. You're a dissident, as you say. You established the boycott from within movement. I mean, I mean, do you feel safe when you're there? Tell us a bit about that.
So I try to not be the number one enemy. I leave that to people like Gideon Levy and so on, who who have that kind of image. But I do have to watch out. I do have to watch out because there are crazies out there. You see, the government, the government, they are mostly they make it their business to know, and they are concerned about the things that they don't know. Whatever I do publicly. I mean, I'm unashamed of what I do and what I stand for. So they know what I stand for, and they don't give me trouble at the airport. The only time that I got arrested at the airport was when I went there to do an interview, actually, on live television. And then all the undercover agents came and arrested me and so on. But they don't give me trouble at the airport. But they would definitely make sure that I know that they know that they are kind of, we're watching you. We're on your back. But at the same time, there are many, many crazies out there. So I do have to watch out for myself, for the family there, and so on. But obviously, we are regarded, I mean, all Israeli dissidents, and there's just a handful. I mean, we know each other by name. I mean, the entire Israeli left is an insignificant number of people, a negligible amount of people. Yes, we are regarded as traitors. We are regarded as a fifth column and worse. Yes, that means that we have to watch out. And we also have to watch out from so-called leftists, not only from the far right.
Right. I see we've got Sean's joined us now, I think probably to give some sort of audience reaction. But just before I bring Sean in, Ronnie, just tell the audience where, if people want to follow your work, where they can follow you on social media or any other online presence that you might have, and where's the best place for people to go to follow what you do?
So you're welcome to follow me on Twitter on Ronnie_Barkan. And there's also other social media, but I think that Twitter is the most useful. Maybe I will take the opportunity to mention that I was also denied legal aid, unfortunately, so I have to crowdfund for my legal defense. So there is on Crowd Justice a crowdfunding campaign because I have to raise quite a bit of money. I'm more than halfway.
What's the link for that? What's the link for that, Ronnie? Because we can promote that. Do you know what the link is off the top of your head for that?
Yes, I think that is crowdjustice.com/help. No, sorry. I'll tell you in a moment.
It's okay, don't worry. I've rather sprung that on you. I should have let you know.
Yes,
that we're going
crowdjustice.com/case/help Ronnie.
Right, great. If we could maybe get that put up on the screen as well, that would be handy. Sean, any thing you want to add from what people have been saying in the chat about Ronnie's comments this evening?
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to jump on and say hello to everybody, all the listeners, and I'm back. Hopefully I'll be back every week now. I have been suffering with a very lingering chest infection, so I do apologise for my absence. There's quite a few people been asking where I've been. I want to welcome the usual people that tune in every single week and thank them for watching and for sharing what we do here. Atcha John, Diana Isalis, and Paul McCord. There's quite a few others. Kira from Ireland is a new watcher, so nice to see you, Kira. Thank you for joining us from Ireland. There's been some really good comments in the chat this evening. We have a question from SBGSKF, no name, just some letters. He's asking, what other UK companies collaborate with Elbit systems? Do we know?
So first of all, I mentioned that there were 10 sites owned by Elbit. Now 8 remain. So the rest are subsidiaries of Elbit, including UAV Engines, including UTACs. There is a lot of collusion between Elbit and others. Elbit and Thales and Raytheon and BAE. I mean, there's a lot of working together there. But there are 8 sites, and if you go on Palestine Action website, palaction.org, you will find more details.
Thank you for that. Also, Nasser Mashadi has left us a message to advise people, don't forget to join the Al-Quds Day March for Palestine, which is going to be held in London on Sunday, the 16th of April. They'll be assembling at the Home Office, which is SW1P4DF in London, and marching down to Downing Street. So make sure you take your pots and pans and your signs and make as much noise as you possibly can. Kira says she's put some really astute comments in here. She said, white supremacy is white supremacy construct of European colonialism. European Christians needed to justify their displacement, massacres, rape and pillage of local populations. So first Christian civilization, white supremacy. Let's see what else we've got here. Archer John says, face the Zionist entity and its lobby. Interesting. Yes, I agree. The more Zionists meddle and reveal their agenda and methods, then the more we can attend and learn and to see them off. Kira said it needs to be discussed more, America's reliance on Israeli military and security state. Israel has intentionally focused on its security apparatus as an economy and to play ball with the US. Now, that struck me because I know this week there's been some news about Joe Biden has now starting to tell Netanyahu that he's not going to continue to cooperate with them, and I know there's been some friction there. Do you know any more about that, Ronnie? Can you elaborate on that for us?
So I don't know about that, but I can imagine that the US will be the last ones to let go of their support of Israel. I mean, the first time that I traveled to the US, I told a friend that I'm coming from the 51st state. I'm coming to visit the main. Sorry, I told her that I'm coming to visit the mainland because I'm coming actually from the 51st state. So there is this quote which I think is quite telling of this former American general who said that Israel is an American aircraft carrier that cannot be sunk and doesn't require any American soldiers to maintain, because you have a wall-to-wall support for the U.S. in the Zionist state. Obviously, it's not, the U.S. has boots on the ground or military bases throughout the world. There's actually only 3 countries that the U.S. has never set foot there, like with its military personnel. But the Zionist state, Israel, is the entire state is its military base, and obviously carries out its. There is a symbiotic relationship between the two. So I don't think that things are going to change that easily. At the same time, I mentioned before that as far as public opinion goes, that could change dramatically. So it's not, there is a very strong support between the regimes, the US government, the Israeli government, and that I don't think that will change anytime soon. But at the same time, the sentiment is changing, and that is something that we have to keep focus on. I will only mention one more thing, because we talk about Balfour, and Balfour was a well-known anti-Semite, and many like him supported the Zionist project because it was a way for them to rid themselves of the Jews of Europe and so on. Because Zionism goes hand in hand with the anti-Semitic aspirations. But at the same time, we have to remember that both the Balfour Declaration and even the UN Partition Plan, which was an unfair plan to divide Palestine, they in themselves were very unfair decisions. But at the same time, they were talking about that what they called the Jewish state, the Zionist state, will respect the rights of all the people in that territory. The Zionist state could never, ever accept the Balfour Declaration or the UN Partition Plan. The very first thing that they did was to drive away the indigenous population, because in the Zionist thinking, it is inherently an exclusive project for them and only for them. So it's not only that they are settler colonialists and came in to take over the land and the resources and so on. It is also about establishing a place for them and only for them. And when the partition plan offered that in that place that was supposed to be the supposedly Jewish state, there would be two types of population sharing that space, that goes against everything that the Zionist project is about. So the very first thing that the Zionists needed to do is to expel the vast majority of the population from that land, and then obviously make sure that those who have been expelled will never be allowed to come back.
Yeah. Well, just before I hand back to Chris, then I just want to encourage people who are watching this. If you keep finding yourself coming back to our channel, please consider subscribing. We're here every Wednesday. We talk about a range of different subjects. Please click the like button, because that helps push out our channel on YouTube. It's very hard to get that exposure. So that would be a way of helping the channel free of charge. It doesn't cost you anything. And come back and see what we're doing. Hopefully next week we've got Micon from Thetford 20-minute neighbourhoods, and he's going to be talking about the 2030 agenda, Agenda 2030, which is encouraging councils to turn their towns into 20-minute neighbourhoods, and it's quite a controversial subject. It's going on in Oxford, and Thetford are fighting back. So Mike's going to come on and tell us a lot more information about that. I think that's me done, Chris. I'll hand back to you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Any final comments, Ronnie, before we close the show out tonight?
So first of all, I have to mention one more thing about Elbit that I haven't mentioned so far, and which is important for me. Elbit is not only participating in crime by proxy, by developing their weapons for the Israeli military, by trying out and perfecting their weapons literally on the bodies of Palestinians. They have been on the ground, taking every takeoff and every landing of their killer drones, the Hermes 900, during the 51-day assault on Gaza, as the Israeli Air Force were dropping the bombs. So Elbit was literally flying those vehicles that were bombing Palestinians. This is as criminal as they are. And this is why it is so important, and I'm very looking forward to that trial that will start next week. So I'm going there in high spirits.
Great. Well, listen, thanks very much indeed for coming on the show this evening, Ronnie. We really appreciate your thoughts and you taking the time out. All the very best of luck for your court case next week. I'm sure that if people want to go along, they'll be able to sit in the public gallery to show their solidarity. I guess there'll be maybe, I don't know if there's going to be demonstrations outside. I don't know if you know that. But anyway, if people want to show their solidarity, consider the Bristol Crown Court, I assume, as well.
Correct. The Bristol Crown Court. I know that the seatings are limited, but there will be quite a few people probably outside showing.
So anybody who's in the area and wants to show their solidarity, then the court case starts next week. Is there a court number? Do you know? Yeah, or is it not that big?
I don't know.
Bristol Crown Court. No worries. It's not like the Old Bailey then or anything like that. It's not going to be that big, is it? Yeah. Well, listen, again, thanks very much indeed, as I say, Ronnie, for coming on the show this evening. Thank you, everybody, for watching this evening. And as Sean says, we'll be back next week at the same time, 7 o'clock. So until then, enjoy the rest of the evening and good night.